The cult of the Crocodile God. If your friend kept a crocodile in their house, dressed it up, fed it dinner, and prayed to it before going to bed, would you want to go to their place for movie night? Ancient Egyptians were so obsessed with crocodiles that one became one of their most powerful gods. Then they formed a cult around this deity, and that cult became nearly as powerful in Egypt as Christianity is in the world today. The great god of the Nile is Sobek, god of strength and power. The exact origins of the cult of Sobek are unclear. Some ancient myths place Sobek as being the creator of the entire world. He was worshipped as early as the Old Kingdom, but really rose to stardom during the Middle Kingdom. That was when legendary ruler Pharaoh Amenemhat III took crocodile worship to the next level. How do you take the worship of a deity to the next level? You give them a makeover. When Amenemhat merged Sobek's crocodile likeness with the image of Horus, another powerful Egyptian god, that's when things got wild. Sobek became the patron deity of the Egyptian army, lending the Egyptian people his strength and protecting pharaohs. He was worshipped as a symbol of strength and courage. Sobek was depicted in one of two ways. He was either portrayed as a straight-up crocodile or as a human with a crocodile head. Beyond his association with strength and power, Sobek was also seen as a protector against evil forces. And as the god of the Nile, Sobek was closely linked to the lifeblood of ancient Egypt. The river's annual flooding ensured fertile land and abundant harvests. Evidence of his worship could be seen in every aspect of Egyptian life. Egyptians were crazy for croc. They kept crocodiles in pools, had them loitering in temples, decorated them in jewels, and fed them exotic foods. If you went to visit a friend in ancient Egypt, you might find them sitting outside by the pool with a bunch of crocodiles decked out in gold chains. Crocodiles were also big-ticket items when it came to mummification. Countless mummified crocodiles have been discovered in tombs, from eggs to full-sized behemoths. The really hardcore worshippers lived in Crocodilopolis, where the god incarnate lived like a spoiled member of the royal family. Crocodilopolis was the cult center for Sobek. They had a living crocodile named Petsukos, whom they treated as if it was the living incarnation of their precious god. Petsukos was dressed in more bling than Mr. T. He lived in a temple filled with sand, had his own lake, and was only fed the finest foods in the land. When this crocodile died, he was quickly mummified and replaced with a new Petsukos ASAP. While the cult was widely revered, it was also shrouded in mystery, with many aspects of its beliefs and rituals kept private. Even when Christianity began to take hold in Egypt, many parts of Egypt continued to worship the crocodile until the Islamic conquest. The Priestess of the Moche. Archaeologists have found a throne room that is so epic it belongs in the Peruvian-themed version of Game of Thrones. Archaeologists think the throne room, found at an ancient site in Peru, was used by a very important female leader, either a priestess or a queen. This powerful woman belonged to the Moche civilization. They were a hugely powerful culture that lived in the coastal valleys of northern Peru more than 1,000 years before the Inca Empire formed. The Moche appeared around the year 100 AD and dominated the landscape for 7 centuries. During their time on top, the Moche built incredible cities with temples and tombs and magnificent pieces of artwork. One of their most impressive cities was that of Pañamarca, built at the top of a granite hill. Although it was once very impressive, these days you need to have a little bit of imagination. Check out this drone photograph of Pañamarca, courtesy of Jose Antonio Ochatoma Cabrera. As you can see, the city isn't much of a city at all, is it? It looks more like a construction site or a gravel pit. Underneath the loose sediment at the edge of this modern agricultural landscape is the old city of the Moche. Inside the buried ruins, which were first found in the 1950s, archaeologists have found a lot of colorful wall paintings. In fact, it's the one thing the city is most famous for. There are beautiful paintings of priests and warriors, battles, supernatural entities, multi-faced men, and prisoners. I mean, the artwork is pretty incredible. And that leads me to the throne room. Never before in Peru has a throne room for a queen been found. This is a world first. So how do archaeologists know this new room was indeed fit for a queen? It's because of the artwork. The ancient throne room is wall to wall with paintings of one very powerful woman. The woman is in scenes receiving visitors, sitting upon her throne, and being fawned over as only a queen can be. Researchers think the mysterious woman in the paintings was the ruler of Pañamarca, and perhaps all of the Mooch civilization. Sadly, no one knows her name. This culture is very mysterious, and there is such little information about them that archaeologists are at an impasse. They don't know who she was, when she ruled, or if there were others like her. Secret gladiators of ancient Britain. Ever heard of gladiator fights happening outside of Rome? The Roman Colosseum isn't the only place where gladiators battled, not by a long shot. Even ancient Britain had its own secret gladiatorial contests. As you may already know, the Romans invaded and took over Britain 2,000 years ago, changing the history of England forever. When the Romans arrived in Britain, they brought with them the culture of their empire, and that included gladiator battles. The Colchester vase is a Roman artifact discovered in Britain. It was unearthed back in 1853 from a Roman-era grave. What's very interesting about this vase is that it depicts a gladiatorial battle. The Colchester vase holds the cremated remains of an unknown person. For more than a century, scientists have been hard at work trying to understand whose ashes are in the vase and what the mysterious engravings on it mean. The exciting thing about the vase is that it clearly shows gladiators fighting. The clay is perfectly preserved, with images of sweaty men gripped in mortal combat. Problem researchers had with the vase until recently was that they couldn't determine where it was made. If the vase was crafted in continental Europe, then it wouldn't be that exciting. Everyone already knows that gladiator fights were common throughout the rest of the Roman Empire, but there's never been concrete proof of them happening in England. What scientists managed to do is pretty awesome. They traced the clay of the vase back to its source, which happens to be near the modern town of Colchester, where the vase was found. The vase was definitely made in England. This means it was likely a souvenir from an actual gladiator match in the 2nd century. Here's one more fun fact I know you're going to love. The modern town of Colchester, located about 60 miles from London, was known in Roman times as Canulodunum. It was the only Roman city in Britain with a chariot racetrack. Between the gladiator fights and the chariot racing, I think Roman Britons were having a surprisingly good time. Armenia's Dragon Stones. Hidden deep within the rugged heart of the Armenian highlands, a forgotten civilization left behind an extraordinary legacy. Towering over the landscape like ancient guardians, incredible stone monoliths stand as silent sentinels, their origins shrouded in mystery. These colossal monoliths, shaped like mythical serpents or dragons, have baffled experts for centuries. How old are they? Who built them? And what was their true purpose? Time is running out to unravel the secrets of these mysterious structures before they are lost forever. They are known as Dragon Stones. It's a pretty cool name, right? And one that the stones rightfully deserve. Scientists don't know how old the stones are, who exactly made them, or what their purpose was. But they do look like dragons, and they are huge. Many of the stones stand up to 15 feet tall. According to local legend, the dragon stones are meant to be depictions of water dragons from Armenian folklore, only not all of them are carved in the likeness of ferocious mythical beasts. Some of the dragon stones are sculpted to look like bulls, snakes, or really ugly fish. The one thing they do all have in common is that they were erected near water, typically a lake or a reservoir. Because of their proximity to water, archaeologists think the dragon stones may have had something to do with agriculture. The ancient Armenians may have been using the stones as a way to worship mythical serpent-like entities, which they perhaps thought would bring a bountiful harvest. Determining the age of the dragon stones has proven incredibly difficult. When they were first found in the early 20th century, it was kind of an accident. Nicholas Marr and his colleagues were at the Temple of Garni to do a paleontological excavation. During their work, they heard stories of strange monoliths high up in the mountains. Naturally, they were curious, and the archaeologists organized an expedition and climbed way up into the Gegham Mountains, where they found the first dragon stones. Nicholas and his team couldn't believe their eyes. They had found actual obelisks from a lost civilization that used to worship dragons. Now that's the kind of hiking trip you can sign me up for. Nothing about the dragon stones has been datable. Scientists can't complete a radiocarbon analysis because there isn't enough organic residue to get an approximate age. It's been guessed that the dragon stones were built around the 13th century, but that's only a guess, and not a very good one. In 1963, a dragon stone was found with an inscription dating to the 8th century BC, making it nearly 3,000 years old. Some scientists have noted that the dragon stones do look similar to other megaliths found in Mongolia, so there could be a connection there. And now for a quick break, but first, it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Ben Palmy and Jeremiah McElhaney for supporting this channel. Thanks so much! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Earth had rings like Saturn. Scientists have stumbled upon a mystery far more ancient than any known megaliths. This mystery is 466 million years old. It turns out that our planet used to have rings like the ones that surround Saturn. How cool is that to know the Earth used to have its own miniature asteroid belt? Scientists reached this conclusion not by looking to space, but by inspecting craters across the planet's surface. A team of experts analyzed 21 crater sites that they think were all created by falling debris from the same asteroid. This was a real doozy of a space rock. It was big enough that almost 500 million years ago, it broke into pieces and hit the Earth like pellets from a shotgun blast. The scientific team was led by Andy Tompkins, a professor at Monash University in Australia. Andy's team used computer models to move around the Earth's tectonic plates, identifying where the craters originally were when they first formed. Each crater formed within 30 degrees of the equator. What that means is that the debris came from a single gigantic asteroid. It broke apart after almost directly hitting the planet. It must have been the size of the planet itself to do this kind of damage. Some of the rubble hit the surface, but not all of it. Researchers estimate that the broken up asteroid would have created a ring of rubble orbiting our planet's equator. Then, over millions of years, the material from the asteroid ring slowly fell to the Earth, creating random meteorite impacts. There are so many variables and implications that scientists are shook with this new information. Because while having a ring of asteroids seems like it would just be a cool aesthetic, there's a lot more to think about than just looks. For example, if Earth did have a ring around its equator, just like Saturn, it would have affected our climate. Our axis is tilted relative to our orbit around the Sun. So, as the Earth moved around the Sun, the ring would have cast a shadow over certain parts of the planet's surface. That shadow would have been like the hand of God blocking out the Sun, possibly causing global cooling and mass extinctions. Researchers think we might even be able to point to one specific event caused by the shadow of the ring. 465 million years ago was the coldest time in our planet's history. If you think the Ice Age was cold, it was nothing compared to the Hernantian Ice Age. It was the coldest period of the last 500 million years. That's really saying something. How cold was it? Cold enough that for around 35 million years, much of the world was covered in an actual sheet of ice. It's believed the Hernantian Ice Age was responsible for the extinction of up to 60% of all marine life. Temperatures dropped, both in the ocean and in the atmosphere, by up to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. What happened to the Lost Tribes of Israel? The Lost Tribes of Israel are a group of 10 tribes that disappeared from biblical history after the division of the Kingdom of Israel into two separate entities, the Kingdom of Israel in the north and the Kingdom of Judah in the south. One of the greatest historical mysteries is the disappearance of the 10 tribes of Israel. But did these tribes ever truly exist? And if they did, where did they go? Ancient sources tell us that the 8th century BC was dominated by the Assyrian civilization. They had almost nothing in the way of outside threats. Egypt had been ravaged and was essentially harmless. The Hittites were a shell of their former power. Israel was also having some serious internal trouble. A few centuries earlier, the United Kingdom of Israel had been a great power under King David, the same David who slew Goliath. After David came his son, King Solomon, whom the Bible claims was a mighty sorcerer. But after these biblical kings disappeared from history, things took a grim turn. Assyria was in the perfect position to expand. In 738 BC, King Tiglath-Pileser went on a tribute tour, only he didn't have a rock band, he had an army. The Assyrian king went through the beaten kingdoms of the old Hittite Empire to Syria, down to Phoenicia, and collected taxes and treasure from the lands that couldn't fight back. Then the king arrived in the kingdom of Israel. The Israelites were forced to empty out their pockets in tribute to the Assyrian king. But they weren't happy about it. When the Assyrians left, the Israelites banded together, called up their allies, and formed a joint coalition to fight back. This led to their destruction. The Israelite coalition was not fit to fight against the Assyrian army. Many Israelites were captured, the kingdom was enslaved, and the 10 tribes of Israel were lost, leaving only 2. The historian Josephus wrote that there are but 2 tribes in Asia and Europe subject to the Romans, while the 10 tribes are beyond Euphrates till now, and are an immense multitude, and not to be estimated by numbers. He essentially said that the 10 tribes were gone, beyond the reach of the Romans, and there were a lot of them. Ever since this event, Jewish and Christian sects have been waiting for the return of the lost tribes. It's been said that when the 10 tribes return to Israel, the Messiah will come again, and the apocalypse shall be nigh. But what if the lost tribes were never truly lost? When the Assyrians crushed the Israelites, historical records show that they kidnapped a lot of people. Written on the Nimrud prism is an inscription saying that King Sargon captured 27,280 slaves, and then turned them into an auxiliary unit for the Assyrian army. The lost tribes of Israel may have never been lost. They may have been absorbed into Assyria, drafted into the enemy's army. Other theories are that they migrated to different parts of Europe, Asia, or even the Americas, but that's a story for another day. A Dark Age mystery. Tintagel Castle is a place where legends collide. Nestled on the rugged Cornish coast, Tintagel Castle has been inextricably linked to the legendary King Arthur. This castle brings up images of warlords, battles, wizards, dragons, and legendary heroes. At the start of the 5th century, for the first time in almost 400 years, the people living in the Roman province of Britannia suddenly weren't in a Roman province anymore. This was how the Dark Ages began. Britannia, aka England, had been one of the most prosperous territories in all of the Roman Empire, but now Rome was collapsing. The empire was at its end, and the Celtic Britons, a diverse population of locals who had been around since Stonehenge, and the offspring of the Roman soldiers, looked to the future. The future for some happened to be in Tintagel, a place like no other. You can't reach this castle today without moving through a fantasy landscape. You have to descend sharply from a small village, taking a road that winds through a deep and narrow ravine. Then, when you reach a small cove hidden against the shore, the ruins of the castle suddenly appear, jutting out against the sea. There isn't any other place in the world where you can feel so much like you are on your way to King Arthur's Round Table. The ruined castle, more than 1,000 years old, can only be reached by climbing the crumbling staircase up to the craggy headland. According to records written in the 12th century, King Arthur was conceived at Tintagel Castle. Then, at 15, Arthur inherited the British throne. He fought against the Saxons and defeated them, and then extended his empire all the way to Iceland and Norway. King Arthur was ultimately betrayed by his nephew Mordred. The story of King Arthur probably isn't as romantic as we think. He reportedly wasn't very nice. Although, to survive in the Dark Ages as a military man, you probably had to be pretty tough. Archaeologist Miles Russell from Bournemouth University said the original King Arthur was a deeply unlikable sociopath, violent and quick to anger. Yikes. The quest archaeologists have before them is to figure out whether King Arthur was real in the first place, and how the mystical Tintagel Castle fits into his story. Miles Russell said there is no evidence that anyone called Arthur lived there, nor is there any archaeological evidence to support the existence of Arthur as a real person. Sorry, Russell, but I don't think anyone wants to hear that. Archaeologists have discovered that Tintagel began to decline around the 8th century AD. It had been a bustling Dark Age settlement and extremely prosperous, but then it was abandoned. Researchers are still trying to find out who ruled Tintagel Castle and why the village surrounding it was deserted. Do you think King Arthur was a real person? Let me know in the comments. Taiwan's oldest human fossil. Archaeologists uncovered a heartbreaking piece of Stone Age history in a place you might not expect. The oldest human fossils ever found in Taiwan are actually 2 in 1. A mother and her baby from 4,800 years ago. Archaeologists embarked on an epic mission to find traces of the earliest human activity in central Taiwan. During their mission, they unearthed 48 sets of human remains from prehistoric graves in the Taichung area. Each grave was unique, but one of them stood out above the others. When it was unearthed and archaeologists saw it with their own eyes, they were shocked. Chu Wei Li, a curator at the Anthropology Department of Taiwan's National Museum of Natural Science, said the mother was preserved looking down at the baby in her arms. The ancient mother was buried holding her infant. She was entombed with her neck bent, face fixed on the child in her arms, as if even in death she couldn't look away. But why? Why were they buried together, and what killed them? That's the mystery that appears to be unsolvable. Scientists know that they died together near the coast. They belonged to one of the earliest farming cultures on the island of Taiwan, and the baby was about 6 months old. The pair were buried underneath a stone house, presumably by their loved ones. But that's where the information ends. This is some of the oldest evidence of humans living in Taiwan, but scientists can't even say where they came from. There are many questions left unanswered. Hallucinogens at the Maya ballgame. It turns out the Maya liked hallucinogenic drugs even more than researchers already knew they did. During excavations at an ancient city located deep in the dense Mexican jungle, archaeologists stumbled across traces of plants. 4 very specific plants that can produce mind-bending effects. Before I give you a full list of medicinal ingredients for conducting an ancient Maya ritual, let me ask you one thing. How much do you know about Maya basketball? Well, not really basketball. It's officially called the Maya ball game, because no one knows how it was played. We do know that the Maya played a game in large ball courts where a ball, or possibly a head, would get thrown about by bouncing it off of players' hips. The reason I mention the ball game is that in the ancient city of Yashnoka, it was extremely popular. There is a massive ball court in the city's ruins, which was the focus of a recent excavation. When archaeologists investigated the court, they stumbled across a strange patch of dark soil. On a hunch, the scientists took some samples of the soil and analyzed them. The soil showed traces of chili peppers, morning glory, lancewood, and something called jewel. Each one of these plants had a very specific religious or medical association. Morning glory is hallucinogenic. Chili peppers are used to ward off diseases. Lancewood leaves are known to have antibiotic properties, and the Maya used jewel leaves for wrapping their ceremonial offerings. These 4 plants did not arrive in the soil underneath the ancient ball court by accident. Researcher Eric Tepes said it was on purpose, and most likely had something to do with a ritual. Perhaps a ritual was performed when the ball court was built, or maybe each time a game was played. Whatever the case, the Maya needed to seek goodwill from the gods. To do that, they conducted a ritual that involved all of these plants. Researchers don't know what was done with the plants. They don't know if everyone involved was crunching morning glory until they could see into the future or what. It's all very mysterious. The lost tree from the Bible found in a cave. A seed lost to time and history has been reborn. Could this be the botanical equivalent of finding the Holy Grail? Check out what scientists in Israel have done. They just grew a tree from a seed that they found in a cave in the Judean desert. The seed is 1,000 years old. It's not the growing part that's got the scientific community freaking out. It's the tree itself. Scientists think that the new tree they've grown could unlock secrets of ancient medical practices. And that's not all. Some have speculated that the tree could be the balm of Gilead from the Bible. There are multiple mentions in the Bible of something called the balm of Gilead. The first reference appears in the book of Genesis. The mysterious balm is mentioned as part of a caravan's cargo on its way to Egypt. It's mentioned again in the book of Jeremiah as a metaphor for spiritual salvation. The balm is used again as a metaphor later for Egypt's inability to heal. In Christian lore, the balm is a sort of divine philosopher's stone. It's considered a cure-all, something that could cure anybody's ailment, be it in their body or their soul. But it couldn't have been real, right? Well, the Romans certainly thought it was real. Famous historian Pliny the Elder wrote that the Romans used the balm for its anti-inflammatory properties. A lot of knowledge has been lost between the Roman era and today. If the balm was real, the method of creating it was lost to history. But now, with this newly grown tree, scientists think they might be onto something. The original seed was discovered in the 1980s, hidden in the back of a cave. Radiocarbon dating placed the seed as being from about 993 AD. More recent tests showed that it belonged to an extinct population of trees, one that used to grow in Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. Over the past 14 years, scientists have been busy regrowing the magical tree. After a lot of hard work and close calls, they now have a tree almost 10 feet tall, and it's perfectly healthy. Scientists are busy studying the tree, the only member of its species alive. It's like the only surviving species of a huge cat, or the only mammoth brought back from the grave. Scientists are trying to understand its secrets. Unfortunately, they still can't figure out if this is the tree used to create the biblical balm of Gilead. The Secrets of Orpheus. Orpheus may or may not have been an ancient Thracian prophet. He may or may not have been the founder of a religion known as Orphism, and he also may or may not have been a singer, musician, and a poet. The curious thing about Orpheus is that he is part Greek myth, part non-fictional legend. Some have even compared him to Jesus Christ. So let me know if you can spot the parallels between Jesus' story and the myth of Orpheus. What historians know today about this ancient character comes from equally as ancient authors. His stories are all mixed up with Greek myth and shout-outs by old Greek historians. Orpheus has been named the greatest singer of antiquity. He was also supposedly the founder of a series of religious rites known as the Orphic Mysteries. The Orphic Mysteries were kind of like the Mithraic Mysteries from Rome. They spread around the world with Alexander the Great's conquest in the 3rd century BC. The Orphic Mysteries continued to be popular for at least 300 years. By the way, if you've been watching the new Netflix series Chaos, this is the real character that the Orpheus in the show is based on. By digging through ancient sources, we should be able to track Orpheus to his earliest beginning. The historian Diodorus Siculus specifically mentioned in his writing that Orpheus came from the land of Thrace, the same place Spartacus came from. The Thracians sided with the Trojans during their legendary war against Greece. According to the medieval Suda Encyclopedia, Orpheus was born 11 generations before the Trojan War. Plato said the war broke out in 1193 BC. This means that Orpheus was born around 1450 BC. Just like Jesus, Orpheus was considered a heretic during his time, and he was killed for his beliefs. Orpheus contradicted what the religious leaders were saying 3,500 years ago. He rejected the religious practices of his community and started his own thing. At the time he was born, most people were worshipping Dionysus. But once Orpheus grew into a man, he decided people should worship Apollo more than Dionysus. Apollo was the god of the sun, and Dionysus was the god of orgies and drinking too much wine. Similarly to Jesus, Orpheus wanted to save the souls of everyone. He was a prophet for a religion of light and tried to drag people away from their wine orgies to bask in salvation. As a result, he was killed by members of the cult of Dionysus. They killed him, but they could never defeat him. Even in the years after his death, Orphic tradition spread. It spread much in the way that after the death of Christ, early Christian texts spread across the world. The followers of Orpheus believed in some eerily similar things to the Gnostic Christians of the first few centuries. For example, they believed that the human soul is trapped inside the body, which is a physical prison. Only through purification can the soul be released. Only by following Orpheus could a person free their soul from the torment of Hades. What do you think about these fascinating ancient mysteries?
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. Hanging disc. Better known as the Disco Colgante, this copper disc was made by the Moche or Mochica culture from the northern coast of Peru. The Moche made many discs made from large sheets of copper that they would then hammer into shape and decorate. Most of them have embossed creatures or symbols such as the sun and its rays. This one is very impressive. It is a gilded copper disc with a crab in the center with alternating plain and embossed discs on top and rings that radiate outward. There are fish in between, represented in great detail. The Moche flourished from 200 to 850 AD, hundreds of years before the rise of the Inca. Scholars were so impressed by these discs that they call this period the Master Craftsman era, and they are still trying to figure out what technology they used to make them. Perhaps the most mysterious disc that has gotten people's attention is this one. It is different from all the rest because it is cut in a spiral. Many believe it is cut in the shape of a spiral galaxy, representing our own Milky Way, and that there is a dark mark on one of the rays representing our place within the Milky Way galaxy. But there is no way they would have had the ability to see galaxies at that time, or did they have some ability that we don't know about? We aren't sure exactly what the discs were used for. Theories range from shield frontals to decorative funerary or religious purposes, but so far scientists are at a loss. Was it an artist using creative freedom, or is this symbolism for something much deeper than that? There's a lot we don't know about the Moche, but this disc is apparently located at the National Archaeological and Anthropological Museum in Lima, Peru, so perhaps one day you can see it in person. The Encoded Crusader Sword. In July 1825, a 13th century double-edged sword was discovered in the River Witham in Lincolnshire, England. In 2015, the British Library appealed to the public for help deciphering a strange inscription found on the sword. It contains an undeciphered script which appears to be religious in nature. There is no way I'm going to pronounce this, so here it is on the screen. Despite numerous attempts to determine its meaning, cryptographers, linguists, and other experts remain baffled. A spokesperson for the British Museum in London stated in 2016 that the sword is believed to be of Viking origin, most likely with a German blade. It would have had a cross-shaped hilt, which is characteristic of swords of its period and is symbolic of Christianity. It measures 38 inches long, 6.5 inches at the hilt, and weighs 2 pounds 10 ounces. Most scholars believe the inscription is an abbreviated or shorthand combination of Latin and Greek, while researcher Mark van Hasselt of Utrecht University has found information tracing the sword back to a type of Crusader sword. It has not helped to better understand what its message means. Maybe you can solve it and didn't even know. Give it a try. Why not? Pyramids of Sona. It is easy to overlook the 8 grassy mounds in a field, but known as the Pyramids of Sona, these formations have an unclear past. Located in Brasov County, Romania, roughly 155 miles from Bucharest, the country's capital city, the Pyramids of Sona are situated in 2 rows, with each measuring up to 100 feet high. According to local legend, the pyramids, which they call grieti, were raised by giants during a time when a princess named Sona ruled the land. The mounds were created after the giants passed through the nearby Olt River and shook the mud off their feet. Another story claims that the mounds date back to the time of the Dacians, an ancient people who once inhabited the area, and that the structures contain treasure. According to historians, perhaps the pyramids are burial mounds which house the graves of Celtic barbarians. They may also contain the resting place of Decebalus, the last of the Dacian kings. Archaeologists have found traces of ancient inhabitants, including ceramics, spearheads, an urn with ash, and even a tomb. These places were of great significance to somebody. Word has it that the mounds were once perfectly shaped pyramids, but that they were worn by erosion into their current state. Locals also believe that the mounds have special healing properties. For example, meat supposedly doesn't rot here, even if it's left out for days. The pyramids of Sona are largely unexplored by archaeologists, and local authorities have stopped residents from digging into them. Treasure hunters managed to dig a tunnel about 6 meters long before they were caught by the police. For now, their contents and history remain unknown. Malta's megalithic mysteries. The island of Malta is home to several ancient temples that pose more questions than answers about their builders. They were built during the 4th and 3rd centuries BC and are aligned to the equinoxes, with some containing special markers for the solstices and even an ancient calendar marker. But besides this, not much is known about the people who made them. There are about 66 megalithic temples on Malta and Gozo, which is kind of a lot for being such a small area. Each temple is unique with different forms and decoration. Archaeologists and researchers consider these to be a masterpiece, representing a technologically advanced prehistoric culture. The builders had an intimate knowledge of the local stone and demonstrated enormous skill. Every year, a crowd gathers at Nidra Temple for the spring equinox, during which the sun illuminates the main altar located at the structure's western end. end. It's been doing this without fail for some 6,000 years, making this and some of Malta's other temples some of the world's oldest freestanding structures. But questions linger regarding Malta's great megalithic temples. In theory, people believed that the first settlers to Malta arrived 7,000 years ago. They descended from Sicilian farmers who brought no known building expertise with them. How would they suddenly know how to build megalithic structures 1,000 years later? And why? Researchers are unsure exactly how the temples were built, with some stone blocks weighing over 20 tons amid a lack of technology. Archaeologists have found chubby female statues, which may represent a fertility goddess, or perhaps a mother goddess cult. There may have been an ancient people here before that we just don't know much about. Others have suggested that Malta is the site of Plato's famed mythical city, Atlantis. Spiral engravings mark the entrance to a temple, which many point to as a symbol of the lost city. Who's to say? But it's a fun theory. Phos Disc. Discovered in 1908 at the Minoan Palace of Phos on Crete, the Phos Disc is a fired clay disc measuring roughly 16 centimeters in diameter, with each side containing 242 undeciphered symbols arranged in a spiral. The disc is shrouded in mystery. Researchers are unsure of its origin, purpose, and meaning. Scholars have dated the artifact to sometime between 1850 and 1550 BC and have deduced that the writing is probably a form of Cretan hieroglyphics based on the language in use at the time. Popular Minoan motifs, including dolphins, cattle, and lilies, as well as their spiral arrangement, suggest that the Phos disc is of native Minoan manufacture. It was likely handmade, considering its varying thickness and diameter. There are 45 symbols total, which appear to have been stamped onto the disc. They also appear to be right-oriented, indicating that the mysterious text is meant to be read from the center of the disc outward. The writing is unlike any other of the period, including the linear A and linear B systems the Minoans were known to use, but all signs point toward it being a readable message, perhaps belonging to an ancient language that has been forever lost to us. There have been numerous proposed translations, and while many were disproven, the rest are unconfirmed. One of the potential unfortunate realities we must accept is that we may never know what the Phos disc says, but someone thought it was important enough to write down. Rozhirch Cave Monastery. In the Carpathian Mountains of western Ukraine sits Rozhirch village, where there is a unique cave monastery dating back to sometime between the 13th and 14th centuries. Built into 70-million-year-old rock, no one knows when the monastery was founded and for what purpose. What we do know is that it was used heavily by pagans, as evidenced by artwork on the walls, but the rest is still a mystery. Local legend says that male monks fleeing the Kievan Rus, a medieval political federation near modern-day Belarus, built the monastery at Rozhirch. They chose the quiet Carpathian forest as the perfect place to dedicate their lives to God in a hidden location. There are 2 levels to the monastery. The lower level contains a large room that is believed to have served as housing for the monks, while the second level holds the church. But the specifics surrounding the monastery's history and the daily lives of its residents remain obscure. It was also reportedly the home of the St. Basil Women's Monastery, according to a 1761 description of the Diocese of Przemysl, but this particular site no longer stands. Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Sitting at an altitude of nearly 10,000 feet at the summit of Medicine Mountain in north-central Wyoming's Bighorn Mountains is a mysterious stone pattern that spends most of the year covered in snow. It measures 80 feet across and has 28 spokes stemming from a central ring-shaped rock pile, or cairn, which is surrounded by 6 similar cairns throughout the wheel's circumference. The Bighorn Wheel is just one of the 150 throughout the American Northwest and parts of Canada, but it's among the most well-preserved and studied of these structures. Its origins are at least somewhat a matter of speculation, however. Archaeologists believe it was constructed over several hundred years by the Plains Indians, and that it's less than 1,000 years old. Remnants of the Shoshone and Crow tribes have been found at the wheel in the form of ceramic shards, and it may have also been used by other tribes. Archaeoastronomer, that sounds like a cool job, Jack Eddy studied the Bighorn Wheel during the early 1970s and determined that prehistoric Native Americans probably used it as an astronomical observatory and calendar, and that it helped predict the position of the sun and other stars during the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. While the construction and use of the Bighorn Wheel has never been fully explained, research shows that Medicine Mountain, more generally, was a significant site to prehistoric Native Americans for around 7,000 years. Today, the site is a registered National Historic Landmark and is used by various Native American tribes as it continues to accurately predict the summer solstice. Nan Madul. Nan Madul is the only ancient city built on top of a coral reef. It was constructed on the southern shore of what is now the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia. Its ruins, which constitute one of the oldest archaeological sites not on a heritage list, are made of elaborate stones and columns that are so heavy nobody knows how they were transported to the site. There are no other signs to tell us who the people who lived at Nan Madul were, including no carvings or other artwork. They were just known as the Saudilur. Researchers know that the Saudilur ruled the island for over a millennium and that they were deeply religious, but they are far from painting a detailed portrait of the people. Signs of Nan Madul's earliest human activity date back to the 1st or 2nd century BC, and the artificial islets it sits upon were constructed around the 8th or 9th century AD. The actual structures, which likely housed the elite ruling class, were probably not built until the 12th or 13th century. At its peak, Nan Madul was likely home to over 1,000 residents. Abandoned centuries ago, the tiny site sits seemingly forgotten and overrun by nature. Modern-day Pohnpei, not to be confused with Pompeii, residents consider the ancient city to be a sacred site inhabited by spirits. Despite arguably being as remarkable as Easter Island, the other main megalithic site in Oceania, which receives over 50,000 visitors annually, Nan Madul sees less than 1,000 visitors per year. It's clearly a place of great importance, and efforts are underway to restore it and protect it, and perhaps its popularity will grow. But researchers remain at a lack for key explanations, including how the stones that built Nan Madul were quarried and transported, along with specifics regarding who the Saudilur people actually were. Glazel artifacts. In 1924, a 17-year-old French farmer named Émile Fradin got his foot stuck in the ground while plowing a field in Glazel, France. Instead of being a regular hole, it turned out to be an underground chamber. Over the following years, more than 3,000 artifacts were allegedly found in the cavern, including items made of ceramic and bone, as well as masks and statues. The underground chamber that Fradin unintentionally discovered had a tiled floor and brick walls. One of the site's original investigators, a man known only as Viple, claimed that the cavern was a Gallo-Roma site dating back to sometime between 100 and 400 AD. The items within were placed into a museum. Subsequent explorers laid claim to even more outrageous findings. One physician and amateur archaeologist, Antonin Morlet, paid for permission to excavate the site. He found various Neolithic artifacts, including inscribed stone tablets, dating as far back as 10,200 BC and as recent as 2000 BC. Archaeologists and the public at large began to doubt the authenticity of said items after Morlet published his findings, leading to great controversy that persists into the present day. Experts searched the site and gave mixed opinions, with some dismissing it as entirely fake, while others said that certain artifacts, such as the stoneware pottery, were real. Meanwhile, some archaeologists wholly lent credibility to the site. This back and forth continued for years and has never officially been settled. The last official report, released in 1995, accused many of the artifacts of being forgeries, while dating others back to medieval times. But with so many conflicting opinions, who knows what really came out of this site? Was it an elaborate trick or an incredible historical find? Hope Diamond Curse. The Hope Diamond is a 45-carat blue gem roughly the size of a walnut. It is arguably the world's most well-known diamond. Many believe that the stone, which is worth an estimated $350 million, is cursed. Legend holds that the gem originated from the Kollur mine in Golconda, India, and that its curse began when a priest stole it from a Hindu temple. It is believed he suffered a slow and agonizing death. In 1668, a traveling French merchant named Jean-Baptiste Tavernier sold the Hope Diamond to King Louis XIV of France before he was mauled by a pack of dogs. Then, in 1792, the French crown jewels were turned over to the government and subsequently looted during the French Revolution. The violent fate of its previous owners, Louis XIV and Marie Antoinette, is said to be proof of the gem's curse. The Hope Diamond passed through many more hands, including collector Thomas Henry Hope, after who it is named. Many of its owners reportedly suffered major misfortunes along the way, including financial ruin, the loss of loved ones, emotional despair, severe mental illness, failed marriages, and addiction. Skeptics of the curse claim that late 19th century journalists used it as an attention-grabbing headline to sell newspapers, and that while some of the Hope Diamond's owners experienced legitimate tragedies, other stories were little more than unconfirmed rumors. Others say that the bad things that happened to the gem's owners aren't necessarily correlated with their ownership of it. Fun fact, under ultraviolet light, the diamond produces a brilliant red glow, which not only helped fuel the curse, but also showed off what a wonderful scientific specimen this stone is. The curse supposedly ended in 1958 when jeweler Harry Winston donated rather than sold the Hope Diamond to the Smithsonian Institution, where it remains today. Thanks for watching! Do you think you can solve any of these mysteries? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon. Bye!